Hello, everyone, and welcome to McGill Cares webcast series supporting family and informal caregivers. I'm Claire Webster, a former caregiver, certified dementia care consultant, and founder of McGill University's Dementia Education Program. I work with a dynamic team of leading healthcare professionals to oversee the program, who include Dr. José Moret from the Division of Geriatric Medicine and Dr. Serge Gauthier, Professor Emeritus, formerly of the McGill University Research Centre for Studies in Aging. These webcasts are made possible thanks to the generosity of donors. Today's topic is managing sexual behavior in dementia. My guest today is Lucy Barylak. She has a master's in social work. She is also a social gerontology consultant for the CIUSSS-West-Central Montreal and a graduate of the McGill University School of Social Work, where she is also a liaison supervisor. Ms. Barylak has developed evidence-based training for seniors and caregivers, and she lectures in the field of social gerontology and knowledge transfers. She facilitates Dear Lucy, an online show funded by the WellMed Foundation in the United States that listeners can call in to seek support and ask questions regarding topics related to caregiving. She was the founder and longstanding manager of the Caregiver Support Centre at the CLSC Rene-Cassin, a multi-service respite centre for family and informal caregivers. Ms. Barylak received the Queen's Jubilee Award for her role in developing a national coalition to support caregivers across Canada. Today, she will address the topic of sexual behavior in dementia and will discuss how to manage situations that can be uncomfortable for caregivers to talk about. Welcome to McGill Cares, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Claire, and good morning. I have to say that caregiving can be very overwhelming, but rewarding as well. I'd like to share with the audience that I was a caregiver for my mother for over 10 years. She had a lot of physical problems, but she also had dementia. And I have to say that even though I specialized in the field, I went through all the feelings that most caregivers go through. I was angry, I was in denial, I was overwhelmed. I was working full-time at that time. I had my own family at home. I was an only child. So you could very well imagine. But I have to say that one of the things that I had to do was validate my feelings to myself. I had to recognize all those feelings that I was feeling. And I had to accept my mother as she was, but not the mother that she was to me. You know, it wasn't an easy process, but I practiced it daily. And I have to say that my relationship with her did change. So before I go on to the topic, I just wanted to say, by accepting her, I was able to move forward in my caregiving journey.
Well, I remember us meeting at a conference in Quebec City a few years ago, and it was the first time that you and I had met, and we connected instantly because of our own journey as caregivers. And I think nothing is more pertinent than when you are working with family caregivers where you could really relate to what they're going through, like truly relate. When you're working with families and being able to understand their journeys, because you and I have both lived that journey.
Yes, we walked that walk, didn't we?
We did.
But inappropriate sexual behavior is very disturbing. It can be one of the most challenging behaviors for caregivers to handle. It could make caregivers and family members feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, frightened, and really, really overwhelmed.
So, Lucy, I'm so glad to have you, with us here today to talk about a topic that has so much, it causes probably a lot of stigma, a lot of embarrassment. I know that I work with family caregivers who are going through some of these challenges. And, it's a topic that I thought was important to highlight just so that people realize, oh my gosh, like I'm not alone, and who better to be able to give us all a presentation on this. So take it away.
Sure. So what causes, the next slide, if you want to put it on, what causes sexual inappropriate behavior in dementia? It might seem strange that someone you once knew as proper, respectable, might suddenly be showing sexual inappropriate behavior. The most important thing to understand is this behavior is caused by the dementia and the damage in their brain. It's not something they're doing on purpose. Dementia affects part of the brain that controls a person's ability to control their own responses. That's why it's important to learn how to distract and redirect them to more appropriate activities. A person with dementia could act in sexually inappropriate ways towards their spouse, their partner, their own children, professional caregivers, or strangers. They're likely to be, confused about who a person is, or might have forgotten that they already have a spouse or a partner. They may become angry, upset if they feel rejected. I mean, these are things that we really need to keep in mind. And I'm going to keep repeating this. You really cannot take this personally. You really can't, even though it's difficult not to take it personally, especially when they're reacting or behaving a certain way. So inappropriate sexual behavior could be caused by a need for a feeling. They feel they want some intimacy. They need some comfort, or believe it or not, just being bored. This could be caused by disorientation, not knowing where they are, that they're not in a private place, or they might be uncomfortable. They may need to go to the bathroom. They might be cold. They might be hot. That's why they're taking off their clothes. They could be lonely, or they may not be feeling well at all. I have to say that even in our society today, sexuality for some people it's kind of a taboo subject. It all depends really how you were raised, your values, your religion, your background, how you feel about sex and intimacy. But I do have to say that sexuality and intimacy is human nature. We all have a need for that throughout the course of our lives. And many, many seniors have very meaningful sexual relationship right through in their 80s and 90s, because sexuality and intimacy do not necessarily only mean intercourse. It's just the need to be cared, the need to hold. It's something that we all desire. So I just want to kind of emphasize that. When the problem arises is when this behavior becomes inappropriate. But I do want caregivers to please take note that certain medications can also boost someone's sex drive or cross-aggressive behavior, okay? So please remember that if a loved one all of a sudden starts behaving inappropriately, sexually, or in any other way, it is time to call the doctor, okay? Because something's going on there. Explain to the doctor what is happening. Many caregivers tell me they're embarrassed to discuss this problem with anyone. Please keep in mind that the behavior may be caused by a certain medication, or it could be a physical problem that you're not aware of. They might have urinary tract infection. Their diabetes might be off. They may be dehydrated, and the doctor needs to know that. As well, the doctor may want to prescribe some new medication to calm the person down. There are some. They don't always work, but it's something good to try. Or reduce a med that they are on as well. So, and also please ask the doctor about any available medication that that they can use for that behavior. It's not the end all or the be all, but it's really, really important to call the doctor as soon as possible. The other thing that I think caregivers need to really consider is telling their family and friends that you trust. So if you are comfortable, it's important to explain this behavior to family, friends, and people that are in your lives. Tell them that you need their help to deal with the situation in a trusting and open manner. They need to understand that your loved one behavior is due to their dementia. If they don't understand, they may not want to visit or be angry with the person or embarrassed for you. Believe me, people who care about you and your loved one will understand and be there for you. You don't have to do this alone. You cannot do this alone, okay? So go ahead.
No, this is an important point because, I'm just listening to everything that you're saying, and it can be very embarrassing for the spouse. And even when they go out in a social situation, for example, like I've witnessed a situation where, husband and wife were joining people in a restaurant, and I watched the husband go around to random tables and just using inappropriate language, calling, women, hey, big boobs, or hey, sexy baby, or, and I think that, I find that with couples, they don't want to let their friends know that one of the spouse has dementia, or they don't want to let other people know. And so the spouse who has dementia could be mistaken as somebody being drunk, somebody being rude, but it's like you said earlier, it's not their fault. They're not doing this on purpose.
You're absolutely right, Claire. Maybe we can show the next slide, because it'll give people a better understanding. What do I mean by do inappropriate sexual behaviors look like? Okay. So they may show more interest in sex than before. They may touch, hug, or try to kiss others. Even strangers might touch their private areas, masturbate around others, or try to touch other people's private areas. They may use vulgar language, or make sexual aggressive advances to their spouses, partners, or strangers, or others. They may accuse their spouse or partner of infidelity. That's a big one. There's a lot of that going on, where they will accuse, wives may accuse their husbands of having affairs, and husbands may accuse their wives of having affairs. So these are really what are sexually inappropriate behaviors. And you're so right, Claire. It's so difficult, and it's embarrassing. It's an embarrassing situation to be in, and you don't want other people to have a negative impact. So that's why I'm saying that it is important, definitely very important, to share that information, not with everybody, but the people around you that you trust, and especially your children and other family members as well.
What you just said about accusations of cheating, we often see in early signs of dementia. It comes oftentimes with conspiracy theories, right? Where a spouse may think that husband and wife is stealing from them or cheating on them, but the cheating is a big one, and that is an early sign. People say, it's not just about memory; it could be a significant change in personality or behavior, and the constant accusation of cheating. And we see that very, very frequently, and people don't realize that it is, and could be even like an earlier sign of dementia.
Absolutely, yes. Being very paranoid or hallucination, these are all signs.
And these what you're discussing here also, this is seen frequently as well in long-term care residences, right? Like where somebody goes from one room to the other room, and it's probably very difficult even for the staff to manage, because I remember when my mom was in a long-term care facility, this is what you would see, sometimes patients roaming to each other's rooms, and it could be very difficult for when the spouse comes to visit their loved one to realize that they have been just becoming so affectionate with another resident at the facility.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting that you brought this up, because I do a whole different session just on long-term care, dealing with inappropriate sexual behaviors. But more than that even, sorry, we also talk about the fact that why can't partners be together in a separate room and give them the privacy that they need? There's a lot of challenging things in long-term care that need to be changed in our healthcare system, I have to tell you. But that's another topic all of its own. So maybe one day we'll do that. I think it's very important to have a daily routine that includes exercise, eating well, balanced food, bedtime routine, and activities of daily living that they do, and really try to let your loved one do as much as for themselves as possible. So why am I jumping into this? Because a routine does distract individuals that have a tendency to behave in a certain fashion. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we do tips on how to deal with different behaviors, especially sexual. I do want to share some emails and some situations. And interestingly enough, I just got this email last night, so it was just meant to be. And the person says, "Dear Lucy, my parents are both in their 80s and live on their own. My father has dementia and my mother is his full-time caregiver. Two of my siblings live out of town. I visit my parents a few times a week, shop and do the laundry for them. My father and I have always had a very close relationship, and he used to call me his princess. Lately, I find him to be more forgetful and not himself. My last visit was very traumatic for me. I was helping Dad out of his chair when he stood up. He grabbed me and started to kiss me, but not like a father kisses his daughter. I was so taken aback that I left as soon as possible and never told my mother what took place. What should I do? Did I do something wrong? Thank you for listening and hope to hear from you soon. And I did call her right away. I mean, this is really typical. I mean, for this daughter to, could you just imagine, this is her father, she was his princess, and for him to start kissing her inappropriately, I could just imagine. And we talked about it, and the guilt that she felt. So this is just one example. I'd like to share another one with you. And it says, hello, I'm not sure how to start. My wife and I decided to have my mother live with us after she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She has been living with us for the past 2 years, and my children really like having her with us. The problem is that a few months ago, she started taking off her clothes at different times of the day and became very agitated when she was told not to do it. This is so embarrassing to me, especially when the kids started laughing. What's going on? I have no one to talk to. And he signed it. It was a male. And again, you know, this is a typical thing. It could be that. It could be something else. It could be that all of a sudden the person starts touching their private parts in front of other people. And then this one was really, really touching and very difficult to deal with. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. So one caregiver told me, she wasn't the only one, that her husband is literally raping her. She loves him, but is scared of him and feels all alone, embarrassed to tell her children. Now I'm talking about a woman in her late 80s. Now, when I say raping, it doesn't mean that he could actually do it, but the idea of being trapped, the idea of being forced to lie down, the idea of being manhandled, with someone that actually was her partner and loved very, very much. Could you imagine the feeling that evokes in a person?
And I don't think spouses, I mean, we talked about this briefly before, this week. And I think a lot of times spouses don't think that they're being raped. They don't see themselves as that. They're like, I should give in. What am I going to do? And they don't want, I mean, I've even heard of situations where spouses haven't had an intimate relationship in years, and all of a sudden this act starts to happen. So it'd be interesting to hear what you have what you recommend in terms of what could caregivers do or spouses do to manage these situations.
There's no one thing fixes all. It all depends really a lot on your relationship with that person in the past. Whether you're really happy to be a caregiver, whether it was forced upon you, whether you had a good marital relationship or not. I mean, all these things do. So it's not, but there are some things that I do want to say. Mm-hmm. If a partner makes sexual demands, you shouldn't give in to your partner's sexual demands if you don't want to. I think it's really important. And I know a lot of caregivers say yes, but then what? Okay. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to say no and to set the boundaries. If they get angry or lash out, back away until they calm down. I want to tell you something. If your loved one has threatened to hurt you, or if your loved one has hit you once, they will do it again. They're not responsible for their actions. It's just a natural reaction. So I'm saying to you, you really need to take precautions. If their behavior doesn't get better and makes life harder for you or them, or if you're scared for yourself or feel physically and verbally abused, you are being physically and verbally abused. We have to accept that. So I think if you know that your partner has that volatility in them, it's important to, to make a plan. I tell all my caregivers that deal with the situation to make a plan. Don't hold and if they do come towards you, don't hold your loved one back. I mean, don't try to push them. This can hurt them and it can hurt you. While the behavior aren't their fault, you need to feel safe in your home. You really do. Not only to feel safe necessarily, because for some people it doesn't get as bad as that, okay? But if you have to hide or you have to pretend or you have to make sure that if you're going to the shower, he doesn't see you undressing or things like that, what is that doing to your life? To what extreme do we take it? So I think that urgent intervention is needed. The person becomes physically aggressive or violent. Have a plan of action in place. I always tell them, whether it's calling a family member right away, and worst case scenario is calling 911. I know it's not easy. Okay. Now, this may be a wake-up call that you may need to explore other alternatives to your present living arrangements. Please never put yourself at risk. And remember, your loved one is not themselves. Don't argue, just call for help as soon as possible. Don't avoid it. What I do want to say is if you're not in a position and situation where you feel that you are being at risk or abused, let's look at just tips. Remember in the beginning, I talked about that it's really important to redirect and distract. Okay, these are really good tips. But what I do want to say is if your loved one with dementia and you're in your private home, and if it doesn't bother you, it really shouldn't bother you. But if they do masturbate and they're not harming anybody, I would suggest to just leave it be. Okay, they are adults, even though at this point they may not be functioning the same way, but they're allowed to touch their own bodies. It might, for some people, that might be something that they really don't want. So don't watch. Close the door, walk away. The most important thing is to stay calm and don't judge or scold or embarrass them. Your voice and your mannerism says it all. So even though someone has dementia, it doesn't mean that they cannot be scared if you start yelling or you start screaming. So the thing is, it's not easy to do, especially it depends on your personality again, but it's something that you need to learn because it's going to be helpful to you at the end of the day. So distracting with activities that suggest comfort, a lot of time we found in many research that we did that if the person is, as I said before, they may be craving something else. I think if you have a stuffed animal, a pillow to touch. Many times people with dementia really crave, I don't know if you've ever seen, they kind of put their fingers together and they're mushing it up or they're touching their shirt. Any kind of fabric that feels good, it does relieve it. So anything like that. I mean, distracting and suggesting other things, for example, take them away from what they're doing. Come on, let's go and have a look at family photos. Guess what? Tell them something about the grandchildren that just happened. Keep their hands busy. I know with my mom, she loved to fold clothes, that's what we did together. She loved to have her nails done. So I would bring nail polish, she would choose the color she wanted, and we would discuss things that I knew she still remembered in the past. And for some men, changing their wardrobe with shirts that close in the back or with Velcro or provide suspenders, it all depends on the individual. Some women love to wear aprons. I mean, put an apron with a lot of little things inside the pockets and just to distract them. But if someone makes sexual advances to a visitor or a family member, remove them from that situation. You can say, come on, let's go and make a cup of coffee. Let's call one of the family members, whatever it is. It's at that moment. And you know what? It does work. It really does. Avoid approaching him in ways that might be misunderstood. Sometimes caregivers are afraid to show affection, especially to someone who, becomes sexually a little bit more aggressive. So you have to know the person that you're with. I wouldn't suggest that you never touch them. There are different ways. There's really good exercise to do. It could be, their arm or whatever. You need to kind of gauge yourself. You can gently touch or hug the person in a way that will not be perceived as sexual, possibly. The other thing is, if the person is wandering around in the house, sleeping in different places, I think, there are body pillows, big ones, that really make a person feel extremely, extremely comfortable. And a hot water bottle, if people still use that, wrapped in a towel, is good. So I really think that it is important to be able to gauge and judge what are the triggers. The other thing is, if people are touchers, so that if you're going into a room or wherever you are, so create a space between your loved one and other people. So when you walk into a room, create a safe barrier space so that they don't reach out and touch someone, especially if they're a grabber. And the same thing when you have your family over and you know that they grab, so make it in such a way that you really can't get to them. Give them something to do with their hands. That's always a good one. Always a good one. It really does really help. If they make sexual advances or touch others in unwanted ways, gently remind them. This is important, that it isn't okay. But be consistent in letting them know that it isn't acceptable. Don't let them do something one time and then say no the next time. So, for example, if they make sexual jokes or comments around others, stay calm and don't scold them. This can upset them. Gently remind them that it isn't okay. Try to change the subject or give them something to do to distract them, and ask others to excuse their behavior and let it go. So these are just a few little hints, but I have to say that they really, really do work.
My gosh, it's just so informative, Lucy. I mean, what I liked, one of the okay, Stuart, you'll have to edit this out because I'm having a little bit of a fun trying to find my word here now. Lucy, one of the recommendations that you had also, it's really about establishing a routine for the person and trying to keep them busy. I like at the very beginning, you started by saying, get them into an exercise routine, get them stimulated, do activities. During COVID, so many people have been confined at home, and it becomes like this kind of like boredom that also takes place. But I think that by keeping them busy and stimulated, it's oftentimes perhaps behaviors like this come because of like emotions that they're feeling. They could also be bored. They could be sad. They have these other needs that you describe. So I think, but overall, what a difficult topic for people to face. I mean, truly a difficult topic.
It is. It is. I think, as I said in the beginning, I think it's one of the most difficult behaviors to deal with. You can deal with other things, but this is because many times it's also a personal attack on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
If they're grabbing at you, if their language is foul towards you or towards family, it's very personal. And unfortunately, we don't have the luxury to take it personally. But how hard is that to manage?
Yeah.
That's why I feel that it's so important for caregivers to get the help and support that they need. Mm-hmm. You're not alone in this. And one of the things that when I ran a group around this topic, a support group, which turned into a self-help group after, they didn't need me anymore. They were shocked to hear what other people were going through the same as they. And those barriers, they let it go. They let it go because they realized that they weren't doing anything wrong. Like that daughter. What did she first say? The first thing, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? No. I think people need to be educated, really educated. And what you're doing is fabulous, Claire, really. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Because when you don't know, and even when I did know, I still fell through a lot of the cracks and all. So being educated, getting support, whether it's private counseling, whether it's support group, whether it's in the public sector. It's really up to you to get that. You don't have to do this alone.
No, and I think your message of, talk about what's happening to you, talk about it with your family. If you don't have family, I know many people don't have family in town, tell your close friends what's going on. Talk to the doctor, because there are medications that, may possibly be able to assist in managing some of these behaviors, but do not keep this for yourself. I mean, seek support. It's so important.
Absolutely. And the point that you're making, do not take it on yourself, is so important, because, that whole sense of depression. We've just come out of, we're in a pandemic, but there's two pandemics going on. There's a mental health pandemic that a lot of us are going through. And from all the research that we've done, caregivers are suffering the most. So you could imagine not only having to deal with that, but having to deal with these difficult behaviors. You got to get help.
Lucy, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I mean, honestly, I could not have had a better guest to discuss such a topic. You're a wealth of expertise and a wealth of knowledge. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. And thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you, Lucy. So this webcast is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. If you would like to make a contribution to our program or for more information, please visit us at mcgill.ca/dementia. And if you would like to join our mailing list to be notified about upcoming episodes of McGill Cares, as well as other important programs and resources from our program, please sign up at McGill Cares webcast, or visit or email us at dementia@mcgill.ca. Thank you for watching.
Bye-bye.